The tropical sun of Manila beat down hard on the windows of the luxurious office, where Manny Pacquiao reviewed his weekly commitments. At 45 years old, the legendary boxer had achieved everything a man could dream of: world titles, fortune, global recognition, and the love of millions of fans. However, in moments like this, when silence took over the environment, his mind always returned to those dark days of 1997, when his father, Rosalio, was hospitalized in a public hospital in General Santos City. At that time, Manny was just a young beginner boxer, struggling to survive on the few pesos he earned in amateur fights. His family lived in extreme poverty, and when his father was diagnosed with a serious liver disease, they barely had money to pay for medical consultations, let alone adequate treatment. The General Santos Regional Hospital was their only option, a place where the always crowded corridors echoed with moans of pain, and where poor families gathered, hoping for a miracle. During those 3 months of agony, while watching his father slowly waste away, Manny met a nurse who stood out amidst the chaos of that hospital. She was different from the other professionals. She always found time to sit by his father's bedside, even when her shift had already ended. At 28 years old, she had a gentle smile and eyes that conveyed genuine compassion, something rare in that environment where routine and exhaustion usually hardened hearts. The nurse, whose name was Thelma Malinao, not only took care of Rosalio's medical needs, but also offered words of comfort to both the patient and his family. She brought small gifts, homemade chicken broth, an extra pillow, or simply her comforting presence during the most difficult nights. Manny vividly remembered how she would hold his father's hand during moments of greatest pain, whispering prayers in Cebuano and offering a dignity that the public health system rarely provided. When Rosalio finally lost his battle against the disease, Thelma was the only hospital employee who attended the wake. She arrived after her night shift, still wearing the white uniform stained from hard work, and offered her condolences to the Pacquiao family. At that moment, Manny, then only 18 years old, made a silent promise. One day, when he had the means, he would find this extraordinary woman and repay all the kindness she had shown during one of the darkest moments of his life. Throughout the following years, as Manny climbed step by step up the ladder of world boxing, that promise never left his thoughts. During his first significant victories, when he began earning enough money to support his family, he tried to locate Thelma Malinao. He visited the General Santos Regional Hospital several times, but employee records from that era were precarious, and many of her co-workers had already retired or moved to other cities. The attempts to find her intensified after each major achievement in his career. When he defeated Marco Antonio Barrera in 2003, winning his first featherweight world title, Manny hired a private investigator to scour all the hospitals in the Mindanao region. When he knocked out Ricky Hatton in 2009, in front of millions of viewers in Las Vegas, he increased the resources dedicated to the search, hoping that his growing fame could help locate the nurse who had been an angel to his family. The investigator, Rodrigo Zambrano, was a meticulous man who had worked for several important personalities in the Philippines. He traveled through hospitals, clinics, and health centers in General Santos, Coronadal, Tacurong, and other nearby cities. He spoke with hundreds of medical professionals, showed the old photo that Manny had kept from his father's wake, where Thelma appeared in the background, but all leads ended in dead ends. Some of Thelma's former co-workers remembered her vaguely, but no one knew her current whereabouts. Some said she had married and changed her surname. Others mentioned she might have transferred to Manila or even emigrated to work abroad, as many Filipino professionals did in search of better opportunities. The search became a silent obsession for Manny, who dedicated a significant portion of his resources to this personal mission. During interviews he gave after his most important fights, Manny occasionally mentioned his search for his father's special nurse, hoping that media exposure could help. He described Thelma as a short woman, with dark hair always pulled back in a bun, with a crescent moon-shaped birthmark on her left arm, a detail he had etched in his memory during those difficult months at the hospital. In 2024, almost 3 decades after his father's death, Manny was in Davao City for a charity event when he received a call that would change everything. Rodrigo Zambrano, his investigator, had finally found a solid lead. A retired nurse from a hospital in Cagayan de Oro mentioned knowing a Thelma Malinao, who had worked in General Santos in the 90s and was now living in a small rural community on the outskirts of Bukidnon. The information came through a complex network of contacts that Rodrigo had cultivated over the years. The retired nurse, Estrella Ramos, remembered Thelma because they had worked together at a hospital in Cagayan de Oro in the early 2000s. Estrella told him that Thelma had married a farmer named Celso Tabanao in 2001 and had moved to a small rural property where she raised pigs and chickens to support her family. Manny felt his heart race upon receiving this information. After so many years of searching, there was finally a concrete lead. Rodrigo managed to get the approximate address of the rural property, located in a remote area of Bukidnon, accessible only by dirt roads and motorcycles. The community had no more than 200 inhabitants, mostly subsistence farmers who lived without regular electricity or internet access. Without hesitation, Manny cancelled all his commitments for the following week and organized a discreet trip to Bukidnon. He decided to go accompanied only by his personal assistant, Jonbert de la Cruz, and investigator Rodrigo. The trip would be made in a common vehicle, without the pomp and circumstance that usually accompanied the world champion's public appearances. During the 6-hour journey from Manila to the rural area of Bukidnon, Manny could barely contain his anxiety. He mentally rehearsed what he would say when he finally found Thelma. How would he explain that he had spent decades looking for her? How would he express the gratitude he felt for her kindness during the darkest moments of his youth? The boxer, who had faced the most feared opponents in the world, felt nervous like a child, about to reunite with someone who had deeply marked his life. The rural property where Thelma lived was even more modest than Manny had imagined. It was a small wooden house painted in faded blue, surrounded by makeshift pig pens and a small chicken coop. The land, of approximately half a hectare DC, was divided between a vegetable garden and an area where some pigs fed in the mud. Poverty was evident in every detail: the broken tiles, the misaligned wooden boards, the clothes hanging on a makeshift clothesline made of bamboo. When Manny got out of the vehicle, he felt a tightness in his chest. There was a woman he recognized immediately, even after almost 30 years. Thelma, now 55 years old, was feeding the pigs with food scraps when she heard the sound of the car. She turned around, wiping her hands on her dirty apron, and for a moment her eyes widened as she recognized the unexpected visitor. Her hair, now gray, was still tied in a bun, and the crescent moon-shaped birthmark on her left arm confirmed it was really her. The recognition was mutual and instantaneous. Thelma brought her hands to her mouth, incredulous, while Manny approached slowly, as if he were in a dream. She was thinner, with wrinkles that told the story of years of hard work, but her eyes still possessed the same kindness that had comforted the Pacquiao family during the most difficult days. Her simple clothes, a faded cotton blouse and a skirt that had seen better days, contrasted dramatically with the elegant outfit Manny wore. Without saying a word, Manny knelt before Thelma, a gesture that left her completely bewildered. She tried to make him stand up, but he remained in that position, gently holding the nurse's calloused hands. In that moment, all the fame, all the money, all the world titles seemed insignificant compared to the opportunity to finally express his gratitude to this extraordinary woman. Thelma, still in shock, began to cry silently. She remembered perfectly Rosalio Pacquiao and his young and determined son, who spent entire nights at the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and eating only what he could buy with the few pesos he had. She had never imagined that thin and shy young man would become one of the world's most famous personalities, but she had always seen something special in his eyes, an unwavering determination and a gentle heart that mirrored his father's. During the hours that followed, sitting on the simple porch of Thelma's house, Manny discovered details about the nurse's life that moved him deeply. She told him that she had left the hospital in 2000 because she could no longer bear to see so much suffering without being able to do more to help. Her calling to care for others had become an emotional burden too heavy to carry, especially considering the limitations of the public health system. Thelma explained that she married Celso Tabanao, a widowed farmer she had met at a local fair, and together they raised 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Rural life had been a drastic change for someone who had spent more than a decade working in hospitals. But she found peace in the simplicity of country life. She cared for the animals, grew vegetables, and occasionally helped women in the community during home births, keeping alive her passion for caring for others. What impressed Manny most was discovering that Thelma faced her own health difficulties. She had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 5 years earlier, but didn't have the resources for adequate treatment. She did her best to control the disease with a restricted diet and exercise, but the lack of proper medication was beginning to affect her quality of life. Her children, all adults, worked in low-paying jobs and couldn't help financially. Celso, her husband, had suffered a motorcycle accident the previous year and could no longer work in agriculture with the same intensity. He limped slightly and felt constant back pain, but continued caring for the animals and the small property with the silent determination typical of Filipino farmers. The couple sold eggs and pigs occasionally to supplement their income, but life was a constant struggle against financial hardships. Despite all these adversities, Thelma maintained the same kind spirit that had characterized her work as a nurse. She told Manny about how she helped sick neighbors, how she cared for community children when parents needed to travel for work, and how her house always had its doors open for anyone who needed help. Her generosity remained intact, even when she herself faced significant difficulties. As they talked, Thelma revealed something that left Manny deeply moved. She told him that she had kept a small album with newspaper clippings about his victories over the years. Whenever she saw news about his triumphs in boxing, she felt a maternal pride, as if she were following the success of a son. She showed him the simple album, made with common paper sheets and homemade glue, where she had pasted dozens of reports about Manny's career. On the pages yellowed by time were recorded the most important moments of the boxer's trajectory. His first significant victory, his world title conquests, his appearances on famous television programs, and even news about his involvement in Filipino politics. Thelma had followed every step of his career with the affection of someone who had witnessed his first moments of vulnerability and determination. She confessed that many times, during the most difficult moments of her own life, she would look at those reports and feel inspired. When her youngest daughter, Marianne, had a high fever and she didn't have money to take her to the doctor, she would remember young Manny, who had faced similar adversities and found strength to continue. The boxer's story of overcoming had become a source of hope for her own family. Manny was moved to discover that his trajectory had served as inspiration for the same person who had been his source of strength during the darkest moments of his youth. He realized there was a deep and spiritual connection between them that transcended the simple relationship between nurse and patient's family. Thelma had been more than a competent professional. She had been an earthly angel during one of the most difficult periods of the Pacquiao family's life. The conversation extended through the afternoon, with Thelma sharing specific memories of the care she had provided to Rosalio. She remembered details that not even Manny had kept in his memory, how his father liked to listen to Elvis Presley music on the small radio she brought to the room, how he always asked her to check if Manny was eating adequately, and how he had expressed pride in his son even in his moments of greatest weakness. These revelations made Manny understand that Thelma's kindness had not been just a professional gesture, but a genuine expression of human compassion. She had seen beyond the Pacquiao family's poverty and had recognized the dignity and love that existed between them. Her ability to see potential in a family struggling against adversity had been a precious gift that Manny had never forgotten. Chapter 7. The Transformation of a Life. In the days that followed the reunion, Manny discreetly organized a series of changes in Thelma and her family's life. He contacted the best doctors in Manila and arranged comprehensive treatment for her diabetes, including the most modern medications and regular medical follow-up. He also arranged surgery to correct Celso's back problems using the country's best orthopedic specialists. Without making a fuss or seeking publicity, Manny completely renovated the family's rural property. The wooden house was replaced by a solid masonry construction with adequate electrical systems, modern plumbing, and even high-speed internet. He installed a solar energy system to ensure the family had constant electricity. Something that was a luxury in that remote region, the transformation also included improvements to animal husbandry. Manny provided modern pig pens, an adequate chicken coop, and even a small greenhouse for vegetable cultivation. He hired an agronomist to teach modern sustainable agriculture techniques, ensuring the family could have a stable and dignified source of income. The property became an example of how family farming can be productive and sustainable. For Thelma's children, Manny organized educational and professional opportunities. The eldest son, Jun, received a scholarship to study agricultural engineering, while the daughter, Marianne, earned a scholarship to study nursing following in her mother's footsteps. The youngest son, Carlo, received support to develop his artistic talents, including music lessons and adequate equipment. All these changes were made with the absolute discretion that characterized Manny's philanthropic actions. He didn't want the transformation in Thelma's life to become a media spectacle, but rather a sincere expression of gratitude for kindness that had deeply marked his formation as a person. The only condition he imposed was that Thelma continue being herself, kind, simple, and always willing to help neighbors. 6 months after the reunion, Manny organized a small ceremony at his home in General Santos City, inviting only close family members and some intimate friends. During the event, he introduced Thelma to his wife, Jinky, and his children, telling the story of how she had been fundamental during his family's most difficult moments. The emotion was intense when he explained how this extraordinary woman's kindness had planted a seed of hope in his young heart. Thelma, now with renewed health thanks to adequate medical treatment, maintained the same humility and kindness that had characterized her decades before. She continued caring for the rural property, but now with the dignified conditions she deserved. Her house became a reference point in the community, where sick neighbors could receive basic care and where children found a safe and welcoming environment. The impact of the transformation in Thelma's life extended to the entire rural community. Other residents in the region began receiving indirect support through initiatives that she herself suggested to Manny. A basic health clinic was built in the community, where a nurse visited weekly to attend to residents. A drinking water system was also installed that benefited more than 50 families in the region. The story of the reunion between Manny and Thelma became a powerful example of how acts of kindness can create virtuous circles that extend across generations. Manny frequently visited the rural property, always discreetly, maintaining a sincere friendship with the family that had been touched by Thelma's compassion. These visits became moments of spiritual renewal for the world champion, who found in the simplicity of that rural life a counterpoint to the complexity of his international fame. When questioned by journalists about his philanthropic motivations, Manny always mentioned that he had learned the importance of gratuitous kindness through the example of people like Thelma. He explained that world titles and wealth were temporary achievements, but that the ability to touch other people's lives with gestures of genuine love was what really defined the value of an existence. The nurse who had cared for his father had become, unknowingly, one of the greatest influences in shaping the character of the man who would become a legend of world sport. Thus, the silent promise that an 18-year-old had made at his father's wake was finally fulfilled, demonstrating that true greatness is not measured only by personal achievements, but by the ability to recognize and honor those who helped us get where we are. Thelma's kindness had found its way back to her, multiplied by the gratitude of a heart that never forgot where it came from.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.